This is Wayward Radio, your official source for news and information on the Wayward Realms. Greetings, fellow wanderers. Welcome to Wayward Radio. This is your ultimate gateway of untold stories, hidden lore, and of course, the latest updates from OnceLost Games' epic creation, the Wayward Realms. I'm Joe. I'm your host, fellow explorer, and I'm ready to guide you through a world of mystery, magic, and mayhem. Tonight, my friends, we've got something truly special lined up for you. We're cracking open the tome of gaming history and turning back the pages to revisit a legend. We'll dive into what Daggerfall absolutely nailed, where it stumbled, and what the technology of its time just simply couldn't allow. Then we'll fast forward 30 years, 30 come September 20th, and we'll explore how the Wayward Realms stands to grow from those hard-earned lessons. Because when a game has survived 3 decades in players' memory, there's a reason for it. And tonight, we're going to find out why that is. But first, of course, as always, we're going to welcome tonight's adventuring party, starting with Ted, game director of the Wayward Realms and the CEO of OnceLost Games.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Hello. Yeah, great having you, Ted. Victor's here, creative director of the Wayward Realms.
How many is this in a row? Are people tired of my face yet? I promise we're going to get some more people on here.
No one's ever tired. We've never seen that comment. Ever. And we've got Michael, gameplay director of the Wayward Realms, is here as well. Welcome back, Michael.
Feels good to be here.
Great having you. All right, so let's jump into it. We got a big show for you guys. It's going to be a long one, so sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Ted, if Daggerfall represented your 1996 design philosophy, right? So what does that philosophy look like when it's rebuilt with modern tools and modern player expectations? What does that look like?
Well, again, when Daggerfall came out, I was in my early 20s. And it was the first game that I ever was a lead on. So I was able to, dictate how things were going. And of course, it was a sequel to Arena. So we were reacting to a lot of things that had happened in Arena. And the thing that kind of brought it all together, 30 plus years later, I guess, by the time our game comes out, barely, was that so many things have changed in gaming. But so many things have not adapted the way we would have hoped they would adapt in terms of the creative process of making a truly nonlinear art. And so a lot of that was going, well, let's do this while we can. So that's kind of a short answer to that.
Sure. You were mentioning a lot of it was like, reaction from Arena. What kind of, reaction specifically can you remember?
Well, it was a very linear story, for example, in Arena. Right. And it was a very cliched story of the evil big bad wizard at the end. I always begin from the point of view as a writer and going, people would say, why couldn't they bring a proper writer on here to make something more interesting than a, bit by bit, gather all of the artifacts together, and at the end you have the ultimate weapon to kill the big bad wizard at the end. And I said, well, I'm a good writer. I can write better than that. And so I made this incredibly convoluted story. And then there were parts of it where we were reacting to, I don't think this was a complaint that people had, where it had to do with we ripped off so much stuff from just I think first edition Dungeons and Dragons, where there are things like armor class being lower is better.
Yeah,
And
taco.
that's a thing where you watch people who play Arena nowadays and they don't get it
Yeah,
because why would that make sense? I add all the plate armor and I have a shield and I have whatever, and my armor class keeps on going down. Like, there's a bug in this game. Like, no, no, no,
yeah.
that's first edition Dungeons and Dragons, and that's how things worked. And things like where you get experience points from killing creatures, and we changed that over for Daggerfall, where we, again, a reaction from our point of view, where we said, no, it makes more sense that a thief raises levels and gets better by doing thiefy things, and a wizard does better for doing magic things, and things like that will we change between one and two. So there's some gameplay things, there's some narrative things. The engine changed in between there, so it
Wow.
was not a huge amount of time between Arena and Daggerfall. I think we did the Arena anniversary 2 years ago. So I guess we had 2 years, which was a long time for Bethesda
Yeah.
Between projects.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially you had talked about it in previous episodes before. Their genre of game was very different back then. So big difference in narrative, of course, but also going from literal THACO to a bit more of a modernized at the time system there for skills stats
Yeah.
rather.
Yeah. I think GURPS might have been a big influence at the times, which is ironic because that's where Fallout came from.
Right. That is very ironic. All right, so obviously, Morrowind changed the direction of Elder Scrolls. We had Arena, we had Daggerfall, and then there was a little bit of a break there. Redguard came out, big.
A little bit, like 10 years, I think.
Oh yeah, of course. And in those 10 years, we had Redguard, we had Battlespire,
Yeah.
and then
Bethesda was almost dead.
good Lord, wow. Now Morrowind comes out, right? 10 years, big difference.
Yeah.
So that it was a big departure, obviously, Morrowind, and I think took the series in a very different direction. Where did you and Julian originally imagine like where the series might go, and does Wayward Realms kind of reflect that path more closely?
Well, it definitely reflects it more closely. As far as where we thought the Elder Scrolls was going to go, there are some plot elements that we kind of dropped into Daggerfall, for example, where I think it's a princess of Wayrest Morgaya, who had promised her firstborn son to the I think King of Worms, and she ended up becoming the Princess of Firsthold in Somerset Isle, and that was going to be the impetus for a plot line for Elder Scrolls 3. That I think the original plan was going to take place on Somerset Isle.
Wow. So so the idea of Elder Scrolls 3 was going to be very much like involved with the High Elves.
Correct.
Wow. Oh, it's very interesting. And then obviously we got what we got with Morrowind. So very interesting. Not totally different. Not so different though. Like Morrowind being on Vardenfell with the Dark Elves, and then you were thinking about going to Somerset Isle anyway with the High Elves. So
yeah, different elves.
Yeah, different elves. Not a massive departure there, but
no. I mean, I think we were. My issues with Morrowind don't tend to be that had to do with the elves, or even that it was kind of weird because Somerset would have been a little weirder than, I mean, High Rock, where most of Daggerfall took place, was very, generic England.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which I love it for that. I'm
Sure.
very
No. I'm not saying that as like a complaint. It
yeah.
just like it was what it was, because I think that's easy for Western audiences to kind of grasp and
Yeah.
do what they're going to do with it.
Right. So in Elder Scrolls Online, Somerset Isles is a place that not only can you go to, but you can actually start a character there. And I've spent many hours in Somerset Isle adventuring around. And it's very much like, if anyone out there is a fan of Tolkien and has read Lord of the Rings, Somerset Isle very much is reminiscent of kind of Tolkien's elven lands, a little Lothlorien feeling. Is that kind of what you had imagined Somerset Isles being?
I actually haven't played Elder Scrolls Online, so I don't,
Yeah.
know exactly. But I mean, the words you're saying are correct. I mean, the thing we had kind of established, again, going back to Arena, was there were certain landmarks throughout Tamriel, and one of them, I'm pretty sure it was the Crystal Tower, was in Somerset. So at that point, you go like, well, there's a Crystal Tower. So what does that mean? What does that mean for the architecture for the rest of the place? So you do expand back on. That's kind of how world building works. Is
Yeah.
that you put a stake in the ground and then you build off and say like, well, if we have A, that implies B, C, D, and E. So
I love that so much. That's great. That incredible wisdom there in world building that we just got. That you put a stake in the ground and inference from there. That's really cool. I'm going to log that in the back of my head. So all right, obviously, compared to today, 1996, there was hardware limitations to what we have, today. But even at the time, based on, what you and Julian were developing, the scope of the project, the ideas that you had for the project, the hardware was still limited even at that time. And then you also had development constraints, publisher expectations, deadlines, team size. There was a lot of things you were fighting in Daggerfall, and those things also kind of helped shape Daggerfall in ways that really don't apply to the Wayward Realms. I mean, I know development for Wayward Realms is a Herculean and heroic effort at the same time, but there are some things going on today that I think you would have loved to have had back then in '96.
I think that one of the first things that comes to mind is I daily miss Julian. And he was a fantastic collaborator. But one of the things that he did was, if I came up with an idea that he thought was interesting, he would just enact it within a couple hours. And so we never planned, for example, in Daggerfall, of having vampires and werewolves in the beginning stages of it. And I just said it would be really cool if the player could become one of these. And he's like, well, what would that mean? And we talked about it. And he said, all right, done. And there are parts where you go, if we had had the time to plan these out better, they would have been implemented better. They wouldn't have been implemented as quickly, but but it would have been, better in the long run. But we never advertised our game as being like, hey, you're playing a vampire game. You're playing, this type of thing. So it was really, I mean, I guess it's stuff beyond Easter egg where it's bigger than that, but it's still that level of, hey, if this happens, that would be cool.
Yeah.
And, and we'll play with that. And the good thing about Wayward Realms has been that we have planned for all of these things, and we've had the width and breadth to be able to explore them and rate them up and figure out how to make them really part of the society. And that being just like one poor example of the difference in a game that was developed fairly quickly, and we were working on like 3 or 4 other games simultaneously with Daggerfall, that we were able to, in this case, say, let's figure out the time and do the world building and the R&D and everything to make these things the way they should be implemented.
Yeah. Michael, you want to jump on this?
Yeah. So I've been thinking when we first got this topic together, I've been thinking about a couple of things about how Daggerfall was built versus how we're building it now. Because I mean, I've been around in this project for a number of years as design lead, now gameplay director. Also worked on Laura as well, and I think some of the things that are no longer limitations or are things that are very not necessarily constraints, but the opposite. I don't know if the opposite word would be right now off the top of my head, but some of the things that we have going on now that we're benefiting from is, for example, all the entire tool ecosystem around game programming, Git, a whole bunch of designer tools. Like there's a whole ecosystem now of tools that our programmers can leverage to make that to make the building of the program so much easier to follow up and track. Like we can track bugs now because we're using Git systems, and those we can just easily narrow down on where a bug even occurred and who actually put it in the first place by going back to the history of Alliance. So there's a lot of really interesting technologies now that not necessarily going into the game that we're leveraging, but exist outside of the game in our change control systems.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of things that we're leveraging now that can, which I personally think amplifies the impact of a single programmer. So there's things like that too that weren't there in Daggerfall. Obviously, there was best practices when Daggerfall was being made, but now it's supported by an entire ecosystem of concepts and tools. Agile, waterfall, Git, all this stuff comes together to really make a force multiplier for the programmers and developers, like the developer team that we have.
It's almost like as if the software itself adds a few folks to your team.
Yeah.
Victor, please.
Yeah, well, I just kind of wanted to add a little bit here and sort of give a shout out to Michael and Hugh, because we do still kind of have those like conversations. Oh, what if we do something like this way? Or, what if we add this, a little addition to a system here? And Michael and Hugh have always been just fantastic about like drafting up a design right away and like, okay, here it is. Here's how it fits in with the rest of our systems. And, now it's just part of the plan. So it's fantastic in that sense where it sort of comes off as planned, even though it's still sort of like an impromptu thing that we came up with.
Hi.
Well, yeah, you definitely always want to have, some reason to riff on whatever you're doing and saying like, wait a minute, I have a crazy idea. And these guys know that occurs daily.
I got another question, but I want to jump over to Michael real quick. Still on this same topic. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. Well, my quick reply to Victor would be, yes. Like Hugh's great. Like the other thing too is the design side of this project is exceptional. Like the thing the design documentation that I help lead the creation of, I think is wonderful, and I always love how easy it is to work with and build up. It's just funny, like how we always say yes to stuff. In my side, I'm like, we're always saying no to everything. I say no de-scope all the time. So whatever gets through gets in pretty well. I'm just looking for. Oh, I turned off my camera. I'm back again. So the other thing, really quick, just really quick, one thing I was trying to figure out where we bring this up in this conversation, but I was just bringing it up here really, really quick. Is that the other thing that's different now versus when Daggerfall was being made 30 years ago? Is that the actual tabletop role-playing scene is a very different beast. It's an extremely different environment of things to draw on and things to be inspired of from the tabletop side today than back when Daggerfall was being done.
Yeah.
Like the entire, like, I mean, I can't show you, but I have a big bookcase of just tabletop games that we have, and actually Kai has one too, and I think Hugh has one too. Like, many people have these great bookshelves full of different variety of games with a whole bunch of different systems and concepts, and one thing I've noticed that a lot of role-playing games made today aren't taking in the modern scene that we are. Like, we sat down and we had a long in design, we had long conversations about how to even approach a computer role-playing game. Like, we even just threw out all ideas, like complete blank slate. What are we even doing? Right. And we came from a completely different direction. And that's the other thing I think is a huge benefit of this game, is that today we have a huge set of options. We can cherry pick all over the place, from weird little indie games that no one knows about to big published games. We have an entire field to build a completely new system from, with all these excellent ideas.
Yeah. Tabletop role-playing games has become a massive industry as compared to, Ted, back in the, early to mid 90s, when you and Julian were putting Elder Scrolls together for the first time. It was really, just D&D and Pathfinder.
And it was the thing where we go to our local store for that, and I think Magic the Gathering had just come out.
Yeah.
And all of, like, everyone who was going in was just wanting to play that.
Michael, let me ask you this real quick. Obviously, we're talking about the differences between how we're talking about collaboration, right? So I kind of want to throw this out there. Not having a physical space for the team to sit down and collaborate. How does that work? Is it a challenge? Does it augment game design in some way? Because maybe you're, instead of sitting around a conference table, you're at home and you're more comfortable. Like, Michael, and then Victor, Ted, how does not having a physical space to collaborate, how has that changed development here for Wayward Realms to your best of your estimation?
Yeah, so I think it's a double-edged sword. The negative, I mean, obviously we're not in a physical space, and I just can't walk over to Hugh's desk and go, Hugh, throw an idea off, and next thing you know, within a few seconds, we have built something out completely, versus back and forth on messaging systems. The flip side is that because we have no home office, the world's our office. Design team has had members from all over the world. At one point, we've had people like design team was 2 Canadians, Swedish. No, where's Hugh? Oh my God, he's gonna be so insulted. Switzerland, UK, Australia, and I want to say somewhere else in northern Europe.
Got Ben in Germany.
Intent, and then no one from the United States for some odd reason. Not because I'm discriminating or anything like that, but we've had like a really, like, you can, like, because we're not physically located, it means our office is anywhere. We can bring in anyone in from anywhere to bring in their ideas. So there's no longer the discrimination of geography of having to either fly someone in or looking local to where your home office is. So that's the other side of the sword. So there's benefits. So I think it's a net benefit at this phase of the game development, because we've had extremely interesting ideas from people you would never get to meet each other in a room in the first place. And we were able
Right.
to collaborate online, on our chat systems, on our VoIP systems, on documentation that can be live edited by multiple people at the same time. Like in terms of remote work, it was extremely handy. There is downsides of not being able just to walk over to someone's desk. We
Right.
lose that, but I think we've gained so much more of having that. The world is our office that we can pull from.
Yeah. Victor, you want to jump on that?
Well, it's pretty much what Michael has said. It's a trade-off. We've had a few chances to meet team members here and there. When we were at GDC, we got to toss around ideas in person to one another, and that was really nice, right? Getting to have that other side of the coin. But for the most part, it is, we love the I guess what's the word? Not variety, but just the different views that we get from all around the world. Yes, the DEI.
Diversity actually stir in the pot.
Diversity is a good term for it. But just having all those different outlooks from different people, different cultures, different ideas, different things they've been exposed to growing up, right? Because say like Michael, he talks about all these Canadian cartoons all the time that I never heard of. We're always chatting about that kind of stuff. So, you have a lot more influences that way on the end product than you would if you were just like more of a localized team.
Ted, obviously you built Daggerfall in Bethesda, so you had the physical space to share, and now you're pushing your vision forward with Wayward Realms in a very modernized, non-physical digital space. Can you give us the pros and cons, the do's and don'ts here on that in your experience?
Well, I think Michael and Victor gave kind of a good I'm sorry, that sounded very backhanded. You guys did an excellent job in describing the pros and cons. The only thing I probably throw in there is because of the time differences, sometimes physical meetings can be a thing we have to juggle, where like our art director is in Tokyo, for example, which I still don't understand the time difference there. So like that I go like, okay, well, when we have a meeting, that's 7:00 my time, it's the middle of the night his time the next day. And so like still trying to figure out like these are the vital people and like trying to figure out a compromise. I think we had our all teams meeting where we try to get as many people on the call from all these different time zones on Monday. And that was 11:00 my time, which is, a pretty civilized time. So that's good. But I don't know what that was Kai's time, probably 2:00 in the morning or, something like that. So,
not quite.
Yeah, well, we make it work, but again, there's a difference between, again, when I think of the development of Daggerfall, to go back to that topic, where Joel and I would go to lunch at the same time and would be physically there, and Don Nalazetti, our art director, would come along and we'd start talking about werewolves, and he'd start pull out a piece of paper and start sketching things out, and that was very natural to happen. So I think they did a good job of listing the pros and cons of that, but I would throw out scheduling meetings. We're obviously we've got our Mattermost discussion place, and we can do a lot of these things online, but there is something about being face to face with people.
Yeah, of course. It's a huge, like you guys are saying, there's pros and cons to it, but there's definitely some big stuff there when you're able to sit down physically. All right, so looking back at Daggerfall, Ted, what seems timeless? What systems kind of feel timeless, and which ones clearly belonged in 1996?
Well, early on when we first kind of launched it, we spent some time putting together kind of the pillars of, if we're going to do a spiritual successor to Daggerfall, what fans would expect. Right. So there were certain things like the scope of the world. We couldn't make a world that was smaller than what we did on that. We couldn't do less freedom in the role-playing aspect. We couldn't have a simplistic linear story. Things like that, which we just said, like, if you say you're going to do a spiritual successor to a certain game, then you need to deliver to the fan these expectations. So things like that are, pillars that we established very early on. And then a lot of the things we recognize that 30 years have gone by, and certain things that were either established at the time or were legacy of games that had come before have changed over the decades, and we need to keep up with. We're not making a game for just the 50 plus age group.
Right. Was there anything in Daggerfall that you guys said, let's move on from this? It worked back then, but now we're here. Let's leave it in the 90s. Was there anything when coming to the table and conceptually putting together the Wayward Realms? Was there anything like that?
I mean, there's certainly things that have changed since then, and interface immediately comes to mind. That's changed a lot since then.
Yeah,
there are some other gameplay aspects. There's a lot of it that, honestly, the whole point of doing this game was because there are a lot of these aspects that we think were dropped 30 years ago that should have been brought forward, and using today's technology to like fully embrace them and really make them the way we wish we had been able to do 30 years ago.
Right. Victor, over to you.
Well, I did want to say, like, one of the things I think Julian was very instrumental in was pushing us for not only, like, matching Daggerfall, but also doing better than Daggerfall. He's obviously like a very, technically practical kind of personality. And to him is like, he's already been there and done that, right? He made Daggerfall. He doesn't just want to remake Daggerfall or make something lesser than Daggerfall. He wanted to push that envelope and make something grander, obviously, how we come to the grand RPG. So I just wanted to point that out. Like, he was definitely a driving force for us, saying, like, yeah, we can and we need to do better. Right. And technology is advanced, there's so much more things we can do. And in that sense, when going to your other question, one of the things I think is a big misconception when we talk about a spiritual successor to Daggerfall is a lot of people think like sprites and, sort of those lower graphic, what we would consider lower end graphics now, are sort of instrumental for having a Daggerfall spiritual successor. And that's just not the case. The sprites were there because that was the limitation of the technology at the time. But even then, they were like pushing the envelope. Even during development, you'll have those sprites that are just sort of, drawn out cartoony. And then you have the sprites that are actually like were rendered in 3D and then, made into sprites thereafter. Right. So you can even see that evolution of the technology within the game itself. And I think that's one thing, like, obviously going into it, the sprites and those graphics don't define Daggerfall. They were just a product of the time. And so that's something that, we don't really consider. I mean, we kind of consider, like, maybe we do a filter, right, just for the fun and, have that sort of pixelated look. I know Michael's a huge proponent of that one. But, that's one thing that we definitely consider, how do we upgrade these visuals to look more modern, and, what's the next step in that?
Go ahead, Michael.
I literally programmed an Unreal back when we were on the Unreal Engine. I programmed the little it's so hard to explain. It would convert 3D models into 2D sprites depending on orientation of player and unit. It was really cool. I move up the pixelation slider, and there's Daggerfall right there. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, I would love to have that in the game. That would be incredible. What a fun little thing.
I'll try to twist Kai's arm. So
I think there might be more than one arm you have to twist.
Yeah, I might have to come on down. Yeah, I know.
Well, Kai's a huge fan of what's the game that he loves? Not Dwarf Fortress, the other.
There's so many other roguelikes. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, my mind's blanking, but he loves those like old.
Hey, Adam, we can go down the list. Adam, Rogue,
just
Cogmine.
All right, is he going to be fired in real time right now?
Yeah.
But I did want to give a shout out to another game. Their studio is a friend of our studio, Ardenfall from Spellcast. They actually have a demo right now, so you guys should check it out if you have a chance. But they actually have a filter on there that kind of pixelates things really nice, and they've got like 3 different levels of pixelation, so you can kind of choose even how much of that you want. So it's a neat thing to see.
And it is funny when I think back on one thing we haven't talked about in Daggerfall was when Daggerfall came out. That's the same time that the rating system came out, and they were like, we had so much nudity and violence and all that stuff going on there. Again, super pixelated. Like no one is getting super excited by like the pixelated boobs in Daggerfall. But we had them. So that's a change where we go like, we're still doing things adult, but nowadays it's something now we have to consider like it can be pretty realistic nowadays.
It's interesting that you brought that up, Ted, because I used to be a huge fan of the Diablo series. I really enjoyed Diablo 2. And now with Diablo 4 out, I got a buddy from college. He was asking me like, "Oh, you're going to get Diablo 4?" And I said, I got to be honest with you, I'm going to skip it. Not because it's a bad game or not because it's a good game, but because I think I've kind of arrived at a portion in my life where what we saw in Diablo 2 regarding, occult practices and the portrayal of that and blood and all that and violence, the graphics at that time sort of portrayed it in a certain way. And today, everything is just so realistic. I don't know if I really want to bring my mind there anymore in such a realistic fashion. So I kind of told him that. So it's very interesting for you to hear the same thing regarding, nudity in Daggerfall and what that might look like translated into more modern era. It's a very different thing. So it's very interesting that you brought that up. I've got to yeah.
Ted's got a great story of like when the ESRB was launching and he had to like fill out all these features that that Daggerfall had in his mind. He was like, yeah, look at all this great stuff that we got. We got gore, we got nudity or whatever.
I didn't quite get the point was we were supposed to downplay it. So I was just, I was just like, can you kill an innocent person for profit? Definitely. Like all of these things and they're like, oh, you are bad news.
And funnily enough, not too long ago, I think Germany sort of redid some laws on their stuff, and then Steam prompted us to do the same thing. So I was filling out similar things, saying like, "Yes, we have nudity. Yes, we have murder or whatever."
Just don't hype it up, Victor. Just don't hype it up.
Yeah, I learned my lesson from Ted. So,
Ted, in your mind, is $1 million question. You ready?
I don't know. Maybe.
In your mind, is the Wayward Realms your Elder Scrolls 3?
Definitely not.
Really?
Definitely not.
Wow.
Well, and it's funny, and we really were trying to push against the whole Elder Scrolls comparison for a little while, and then it started coming out where people were like, "Hey, Wayward Realms is the Elder Scrolls Buster, and we're changing everything." There's so much different having to do with the development of the game, the philosophy on the game. I mean, the philosophy on the game, like we were talking about, the pillars are the same, but it is, the world is so different, and the way we're developing it is so different that I don't know what they're going to do with the next Elder Scrolls, but we're definitely not going to make anything like Morrowind. And that's with all respect to Morrowind.
Sure.
That it's we're making our own thing. There's a lot of nods to the previous Elder Scrolls, but in no way is this that.
Right.
I think also the landscape has just changed so much that it's really like it harkens to a lot of those principles and design philosophies, but it really is a really different beast altogether.
Yeah. Very interesting. I'm very glad that we were able to get that, because you know what, you hear sometimes folks saying, this is kind of like their Elder Scrolls 3 or something like that. So it's really great to hear that. All right. So obviously Daggerfall was really, it was famous for its size. With the archipelago, how are you guys thinking about scale differently? Especially in terms of density and meaningful content. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. So I think one of the big differences between what we're doing today and what Daggerfall was doing in the 90s is that and again, this will go back to technical limitations, but also design philosophy, is that there are, of course, points of interest, and you would see this in a lot of open world video games, that there's points of interest with nothing in between, and the solution to that is to compress the space. For us now, we're building a very uncompressed space, a very open, the size of Great Britain space, and it results in their coming to terms and accepting that there is nothingness in the game space. And I think that is an important thing. I think I've spoken on this before, that having breathing room is important to story, to character reflection, to all these things. And obviously we want to have stuff. It isn't just an empty sandbox. We were going to have things, both things that are static in the world and random events and a whole bunch of stuff intersecting the player. But with that amount of scale, you have to shift your thinking towards accepting just dropping in the map randomly in the middle of the world and just looking at a cool forest. Nothing's really going on, just wandering, looking at the trees, having a good time. You have to kind of accept that is an experience as valid, an experience that adds to the heightened situations of going to a dungeon or going to a city or having bandits pop out at you, right? That quietness, that emptiness is just as important to the web and the fabric of the game as the highlights, right? So that's one thing that I was thinking about when designing this, is that we're going to have empty space and we have to accept that and embrace it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It's one thing now, my favorite thing in a game is the dungeon crawl. I love it. I love going through dungeons, getting through traps, killing the enemies, finding the treasure, saving the princess in the tower, kind of a thing. I love it. But man, when you're done with that, I love just getting outside and just taking a breath. Go ahead.
Just come out and just look at the sunset. Okay, yes,
right.
Reset. Yeah,
exactly. So it's true what you said, Michael, that some of the most important story beats that you can have is really just some breathing room. All right. So, obviously Daggerfall was allowed some extreme character builds that we all love, right? Even broken ones. Is that layer that level of player freedom, is that still in your philosophy? And if so, Michael, like how far are you guys taking that? Because Daggerfall took that to the extremes. Michael, how far are you taking it?
You don't know what extremes are. No. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things when we were doing character design is we looked at Daggerfall's system and we went, okay, how can we make even more diverse builds? How can we break this down and atomize the things we use to put together characters even more? We have a system now that is, because of the VGM and the questing system and so on, we have a system now that I think maybe this will be another change how you view it, is that older games would be you're playing a traditional role-playing game with a single character and the world's laid out as it is and you kind of hit into things. You could be a fighter or a thief or a mage, or usually you just kind of coalesce into a happy center of all those things and hit all the guilds, right? Whereas with this game, you can almost think of it as like a solo role-playing game in its construction, in that your character, how you are built and how you run your character is attention's being paid to it, and the world and the questing's being adapted to face it, right? So unlike other games, this game, if you build an extremely bespoke, interesting, weirdo build, the game will roll with you on that and will kind of heighten you in. And the way we've done leveling system and how characters grow leans into that. If you play in a certain set of skills and expertise, you will grow as a character into those things more. So it's not like there's no real roadblocks. So we obviously, when we design the game, we think about the constraints, right? Think about regular magic and thieving and fighting and talking to people and all the other subsystems. But in my back of my head, I'm like, okay, you can make really weird characters. You can make very weird combination of skills and attributes and gameplay styles and just really hit the world in weird ways. And because we have a very simulationist philosophy on how things are kind of run, it means that the simulation is not adaptive, but accepts many different ways of being interacted with. We have a sample quest of how you run things, and when we kind of war game out how quests were resolved, we thought of all the different ways of all different builds and really weird ways of coming out and how that kind of resolves. So I think the other word too is broken. We're not really interested in broken characters, because my philosophy would be I would want weird extreme builds to still be viable and not necessarily, I don't know, broken. When I hear broken, I hear not functional and not working the way the game wants you to work. Was I think when I hear broken, I kind of want it to be like you can lean into really weird stuff and the game will accept that and lean in with you. So that's the hope, at least. So
I will say, just to interject, is that also goes to when you're talking about the direction that the Elder Scrolls went post Elder Scrolls to Daggerfall. And I think every game after that, the number of skills, for example, went down and down, down and down and down, where they're like, we don't need, quite this variety of different role-playing experiences and different characters that you could be. It's simple for us to just, stick with this. So that has been a big part, because again, one of the great things about, and we actually have called out the Daggerfall Unity project, but that kind of brought a whole group of people who have never played the game before into playing this. And there's all sorts of ones like I always bring up the example of the Mad Genius, who took all of the languages from Daggerfall, which were kind of, to Michael's point, broken on arrival, like that they were, not functioning the way we wanted them to do. And because of mods now functioning in an interesting way, and he made a character I never would have imagined. And that is what I'm excited about seeing from players is things. I can imagine a whole bunch of different characters, but I can't imagine all the characters. And show me something cool and new that you did with these different tools that we threw out on the table, and inspire us to make that even cooler.
So about maybe 12 or 13 years ago at this point, I was running a show called Elder Scrolls Off the Record, and we had Gavin Clayton on, who's the creator of Daggerfall for Unity. And so I got a chance to sit down and chat with him regarding what he was doing at the time. Now, at the time, he'd been at it for a couple of years. It was a solo project. And just he hadn't. I don't think he gotten anyone on the project yet. But I don't think he knew. I don't think anyone knew at the time what the effect of his efforts were going to be. And now we look at it, and you could see Daggerfall for Unity, and it has single-handedly revived the interest in Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall.
Yeah.
It basically got a re-release for free. I mean, and I say that because I attribute it completely to Gavin Clayton and his, heroic efforts of passion here, because Bethesda has released the game for free. They did it on Steam. They came out with the Elder Scrolls Anthology, which Arena and Daggerfall were a part of that beautiful multi-disc product that they released. And no one cared. No one got it, and it ran like the game. If you downloaded it for free, it just didn't run well on modern systems.
Sure.
Gavin Clayton, what he did was he got it to run very well on modern systems. So that's why I'm saying this, that I think you can credit him specifically for reviving the game. And now you play it, and I have it. I play it all the time. I make some wonky builds on there, and you really get a chance to see, Ted, you and Julian's, what you came out with. I don't know if it's your full vision, but
Well, I mean, it's better than that, because it was not, as opposed to Wayward Realms, which
Right.
we can get into.
Yeah.
About one of the big changes. One of the biggest changes was that we are making this game with understanding that modding is a thing now. And in 1994, it was not a thing that people were doing. And so we have, adapted that. But in Daggerfall Unity, that's part of the way the game works, is to recognize that, for example, in the Mad Genius build, which or the series, that it's playing the animal languages or the monster languages with a mod way of that working. It was not the way it was working on release at any version of the game. So it is a thing where the game is literally better than it was in the early 90s.
Wow. So Gavin finished the vision.
Totally.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Michael, on modding, I know you got something, Michael, but I want to ask you about modding in a minute. Go ahead, Michael. What do you got?
Yeah, it's somewhat related to modding. I was going to say that, I think the revitalization of Daggerfall through Daggerfall Unity is, I don't know. I don't want to say it's the most important accomplishment of all gaming history, but I think it's one of those things where now, yeah. So, but I think it's one of those important things for two reasons. One, now other projects go, oh, what other weird gems are in the background of gaming history that we can bring in and revitalize and find other gems. I'm sure there's other projects now looking what other gems exist of gameplay and experiences that just didn't catch because of limitations at the time, right? And then the other thing I want to say is, like, I think the cool thing with Daggerfall Unity, and I will put a penny on this for a bet, would be at some point when the final tallies are made, there will be far more mods made for Daggerfall than Skyrim or something like that. Like the actual legacy of Elder Scrolls modding will be on Daggerfall Unity. That will be like, I think we have not even seen a fraction of what we can do with that engine and with that particular setup of the engine. I think it's going to go so far, it's going to be ridiculous. I'm waiting for the conversion mods personally. So,
wow.
Yeah,
amazing to hear that, because you couldn't calculate at the time that Daggerfall could or would have a large modding community. You're sort of building that into the Wayward Realms. How are you guys taking, knowing that, and you didn't know at the time Daggerfall, could and should be modded by the community. How are you taking that lesson into the Wayward Realms beyond, we're going to just allow mods? Like, how are you guys, like, how far are you guys going with that? How far do you want to go with that?
Yeah, so I can say for my part, when I was lead designer, one of the things when I was designing the systems, and it's partly baked into like the design directives documentation, is that the anticipation is we're making a system for this game and also for modders. And when we're building the systems and designing the systems, we have modularity in mind and have it in mind, say, okay, here is the points where people can tweak this stuff. Like, here's the thing where people can grab and run with it, right? That was part of the philosophy going into this game design wise, is that we're going to open it up and have it in such a way that it's easily moddable in terms of conceptually moddable. Like, you can pop in new concepts here and there and actually make it work. New skills, new this, new that, new weapons, new factions, right? Things are made in a way that you can just pop more content in and or modify the structures that are there. It's pretty wide open. That was the design philosophy going in.
Victor, you want to jump on that?
Yeah. And going back to our recent devlog, Kai was talking about the modding in there and showing off, our systems and stuff. And we've got a lot of comments where people are saying, oh, this is great. You guys should make a creation kit like Bethesda has. And, I just point out, like, you're looking at it, like, you guys are getting the same tools that we're using to create this world. We're trying to give you guys as much control over this as possible. So, from the very ground up, we're building this to give you guys access to everything.
Wow. So you guys are just going all the way on the modding, like, jump in 2 feet deep on modding. Literally the same tools that you guys created the game with are being released.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is, like, this is a game that we are going to be playing a lot ourselves, right? Just the very nature of the game, the replayability, the crazy things that can happen within a playthrough, wildly different from one another. It's something that we'll be able to enjoy over and over again ourselves. And I'm so excited just to give modders all these capabilities. And then that's something we can benefit from as well. See what kind of crazy things they come up with, and for us to enjoy those as well.
So do you think there might be a Macho Man Randy Savage mod for Wayward Realms?
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, is the minute you walk out of a town, you just hear, oh, yeah.
So I got to go.
Poor Ted. He's like, my vision's getting scrambled on. So, on to, some of the other, design features here. Obviously, procedural dungeons in Daggerfall were an iconic feature. Yeah, but sometimes they're overwhelming, and in other times just straight up broken, right? You get a quest, you go into a dungeon, and sometimes you just, you couldn't complete it. So what lessons did you guys take from using that system? Because I know you're going to be doing the same things here in Wayward Realms. So what's like the do's and don'ts of Daggerfall here regarding, procedural dungeons into the Wayward Realms?
So can I tell a story? It literally happened Monday. We're having a conversation with our lead programmer, and we're discussing this very issue and saying like, what are our limits on architecture, basically? So above or below ground. And he said about 900 levels high and 900 levels deep. And I said, y'all don't do that. Like we did that in Daggerfall. Like you, like we do not need a 900 level deep, super complicated dungeon, or vice versa. Same thing in reverse. So we have unlimited world to build this in, but and again, this might go back to modding. Like, yeah, if you want to build crazy, super deep dungeon, we're not going to build it,
Yeah.
but you own the power to do that.
I was just going to say, sprawling 900 layer underground, that's the Underdark in D&D.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that modders would love to have that kind of,
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
And that's a number off the top of my head. It may not be that, but it's in that vicinity where it was so obscenely tall and deep that going like no. Okay, like that's cool. But I mean, in Daggerfall we had crypts that they were we differentiate between dungeons and crypts to say like a crypt could just be a set of stairs down to a room with a lich in it, and that might be it, which could be pretty intense.
Yeah, especially with a lich. Victor, do you have anything on this with regarding procedural dungeons and Wayward Realms?
Well, going back to like Daggerfall Unity and stuff, like we also take lessons from the mods that people are making for that. And I think one of the, I think it was a mod. I think it's now just actually part of the actual Daggerfall Unity options is you can just click on smaller dungeons.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have to, spend days lost in one of these things. And so that's obviously something that's been on our minds from the beginning is like, yes, those dungeons were amazing. But there's also like, if that's all that you have, then that they sort of lose that value of it being a giant sprawling dungeon. So we kind of want more of that variety where you have that like, crypt size one where it's a stair in a big room and one enemy or whatever. And we do also want the giant sprawling ones for, very special occasions that you're going to remember, it's an important quest or just a very important location in itself.
I got another thing that I would add on to that is also our dungeons are designed to make sense. So like it's not just complicated for the sake of being complicated. Like there's history, there's a logic, there's something else going on beyond just wandering around corridors just because apparently someone built corridors for no reason.
Yeah, so whenever I DM a D&D campaign, I always try and make sure I do the same thing with my dungeons because I've been in the big sprawling dungeon, had a lot of fun in doing it, but at the same time, I also want to make sure that what I'm building in my game has the cohesion that you see outside of the dungeon. There's a structure, there's a social structure, there's an economy. Players contribute to the economy in the D&D games I build.
Yeah.
But then you've got this weird dungeon where, there's just wild things that no one would ever build are in. It just doesn't make sense. So it's nice to hear that there's that kind of like attention to details is being put into the dungeon experience here. Michael,
I just want to say, as gameplay director, I've been hogtied that I cannot make infinite dungeons, even though I have the tools to go 99 layers deep and 99 layers high.
I know. I broke your little heart.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't give you that nightmare. I apologize. But going off what you just said, Joe, is that one of the things in this system for the procedure dungeon, and it just wasn't there, and this would have been one of the limitations of the time, is that we have new, I say architectures, we have new tools and new types of like math that we can use for our dungeon systems, and for a lot of type of procedure generation in general, like Wave 4 function collapse. There's even newer, more cutting edge technologies that are on their way. So unlike Daggerfall, those usually we're just going to spline together very large chunks of like known configurations together to make our dungeons. We can get extremely finite, and on top of that, we can also like the design of the dungeons is label aware or context aware, so that when you're building it, you can associate labels to layers of the generation. So every pass has content that can be updated or changed. So the current inhabitants could be orcish, and then you go kill them all. Okay, we're going to add a new one. We're going to put goblins in now, and that updates that layer when it generates out. So you can have, not only do we have better tooling to generate the dungeons, so they're not insane sprawling messes, and also we can have rules in those generations that make them coherent, very much like Ted say, or I forget, Ted or Victor saying, like, it actually is a logical, consistent design that actually makes sense in the world. It could be something that can be updated as time goes on, and also something that can be tied into the world. Like with our questing system, we can tie in dungeons and have dungeon related content be injected into a dungeon while you show up based on it. Right? We have a very much more finite, not finite, nuanced tools to make dungeons more engaging, not just the proc gen out, right?
Yeah.
So we're managed to get both the benefit of more handcrafted experiences, but also have that scale of just the many dungeons in the world. So
right, not just.
But the other thing that brought up when I wrote down when Michael was talking about the dungeons was we made dungeons in Daggerfall the same way we made towns, where we created little blocks and we rotated them and we fit them in, and there were little, like, entries and exit points, and hopefully most of the time they fit together, but they didn't always. But we make both towns and dungeons very different nowadays. So that is so because there was always the thing in both of those cases where you're like, oh, I know, if I go left, that's where the treasure usually is, or whatever, because I'm used to this dungeon point. So we again, the things we did in the past and things we've learned to do better.
Right. Well, all right. So why don't we move on to our question from Discord here? This comes from Raven, who's got a question about goddesses and the etymology. And Raven asks, these last couple episodes really got me thinking about why we still use the word goddess when there's no male gods in the setting. To me, it feels like being female would be considered the default state in this world, and the male condition would be the one that comes with modifications to base words / titles. Is there any more elaboration we could get around this point, or do we just use the same terms we would in real life for convenience sake? Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, so, and I think they might have asked the same question on like YouTube or something like that, and I did answer it for them, but I will answer again for the community, of course. So in our setting, the archipelago especially observes an all-female pantheon, but it's the world is much larger than just the archipelago, and it's not the same pantheon for the entire world. And in the rest of the world, there are male gods, and there are even male versions of these female goddesses that we have on the archipelago. And there's sort of multiple layers to this answer. so both do exist, right? We do have gods and we do have goddesses. People would know there's two different terms for that. Also, from the Orcish standpoint, the orcs being the natives of the archipelago, being matriarchal, there being the influence for an all goddess pantheon, the orcs don't really differentiate that much between the sexes or gender in their language. For instance, like they actually just use orc for everything. It's not plural orcs, it's just orc. It's not orcish, it's just orc. It's something we don't use a lot in talk because obviously communicating with the people, or with the community, it's much easier to use those terms and really let you know what we're talking about. But in the actual orcish, language and their way of speaking, it's all just orc. So in a similar way, it's just god or goddess or whatever. And then finally, there is the way we view language in our game is like there's actual languages that do exist in this world, and we're sort of giving you the translation to our modern language, English in this case, but later on we do localization and stuff, it'll be sort of the translation into those languages. Right. So there's sort of a suspension of disbelief there, where these things are conveyed to you, the player, in a way that you would best understand what's going on in this world.
Makes sense. The translation is occurring for you in real time, but there are other languages. Anyone else want to jump on that? Elaborate maybe, or no? Okay.
Having goddesses is a selling point.
Having goddesses what?
Is a selling point of the game. We got to cater to the audience, I guess.
No. Yeah, that was not a part of the creative decision.
Fair enough. I'm on a limp. Okay. So
according to the last Wayward Radio episode, it's really all about the nymphs. Those are
this is true. This is actually very true.
I mean, you're not wrong.
All right.
I mean, actually, anyone who's read Greek mythology goes like, and then the nymph showed up, and they're like, yeah, that's going to be interesting.
All right, folks, before we close out the show, just kind of want to get any final thoughts on the do's and don'ts of Daggerfall, starting with Victor.
Yeah, I mean, we're all obviously, Ted, Julian, Eric, they played a huge role in actually creating the game, right? It's their baby. So they know it intimately, and this is sort of the next step for them, what they wanted to do after that. For the rest of the team, we're huge fans, right? We love that game. We play it a lot. We download the mods. We check them out. So it's something we're very familiar with ourselves, not as intimately, but it's something we love, we care about. And really when we look at it, it's just what we ourselves see as the good things in Daggerfall is the thing that could use some work, and then the things that just flat out don't work in a modern sense anymore. So it's really just honestly like a labor of love for us to take it and reinterpret it into a new game, the next evolution of it.
Michael, any final thoughts?
Yeah. So the way I would say is that many of the don'ts were completely not Daggerfall's fault, and you can never blame her. She's perfect in every way. You can't. Many of the don'ts are just limitations of technology and infrastructure and not best practices, but the scaffolding infrastructure around, like I was talking before. Like many of the flaws of Daggerfall is a marker of its time, right? And many of the do's we want to are just things that are the everlasting great concepts of the game: open world, player choice, all these things that now we have the opportunity to really exemplify with a whole bunch of new technology and techniques, and many limitations taken away. In some ways, we're unbound, and we have to limit ourselves so we don't have crazy feature creep or anything like that. So I really see it that way. It's just we're in a very different time now where the don'ts don't really apply anymore because it just advances. You just kind of have to wait 30 years, and then all the don'ts just don't apply. So
that works. That works.
Suddenly it doesn't matter anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Ted, do's and don'ts. What do you think?
I guess two things come to mind. One was sentimental, based on what Michael just said. And I think I might have mentioned this on the earlier podcast where we were talking about Julian's legacy. And so there's you know, always that thought of like, okay, what would he want, and what was his aim, 30 plus years ago, and what would he want right now? So like, there's that sentimental side. I mean, I intellectually know it, but also emotionally know it, and to some degree, it's also like how we run the company. Like, there's even beyond this one game, thinking about him and like what the game and the company should be. I think the other thing that on the very opposite end of the scale is legacy of Daggerfall back in the day was being very buggy, and I think we've talked about how we were building this, and the tools that we're using, and the way that we are approaching the code on this is going to be very different, and has been very different. So we will not be projecting forward the Elder Scrolls legacy of making buggy games.
Unless people really want that, then we'll patch it in.
It's a special, like, random bugs, like a little trigger that gets was like,
listen, if people really want the bugs, I can sit down for a good vibe coding session and give you all you need. Okay.
Every 30 minutes there should be a crash.
Yeah, exactly. I can make it happen. So just let us know.
I believe in you.
Thanks, Ted.
Michael, I demand homes without doors.
On it. Sold.
Ted, one last question. What should OnceLost Games be?
Oh, the game company in general?
What should it be? Yeah.
Well, there's a part where you look at the cliches of game companies. One of the things that Julian and I discussed probably most seriously in the last year of his life was being a company that is kind to its employees. And the game industry is not renowned for that. So that is a big part. As far as the games we're going to make going forward, it only makes sense both creatively and smart business-wise is to say we're going to build on the technology that we're building for Wayward Realms. So if we go off in a different directions in terms of genre or world or whatever, going from science fiction to sci-fi or whatever, it's going to be building on things that we've gotten, we have nailed down this time. We're always going to be building forward, but there's no reason why we would reinvent the wheel each time.
Right. Love hearing that. Thank you very much, especially for folks listening who possibly may want to, get involved. And, there's young people listening who are thinking, do I want to get in the video game industry? How do I do that? It's good to hear these thoughts. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have ended our quest for today. We want to thank you all for listening and downloading. And if you're looking to help out OnceLost Games and the development of the Wayward Realms, well, there's a couple of things you can do to help us out. Number one, you could wishlist Wayward Realms on Steam. That's a massive help. You could like and share and hit that notification bell right here on YouTube at OnceLost Games. Some comments always help out. We read all the comments here on YouTube. Also on Spotify, you can do that on Spotify or give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Hang out with us on Discord, found at waywardrealms.com. You can follow us on all social media at OnceLost Games. And you can always send us an email, pr@oncelostgames.com, if you are looking to find a way to join us. We'll see you in our travels. And until then, happy exploring.